That's very exact. Oh, okay, we're good.
Like 12 seconds? That's, yeah.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Nags Head Planning Board meeting for Tuesday, December 19th.
We have
Mr. Ferguson. Excuse me. Good morning.
here.
You're fine. Our first order of business this morning is actually going to be the election of a vice chair. So motion would be in order if anyone's interested in.
I would like to nominate me.
Okay.
Yes.
So we have a motion on the floor.
Well, thank you.
Any second?
Second.
And a second?
I love that.
Any discussion? Other nominations? Anything like that? Great. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mead. I'd like to nominate Mead.
Okay. You concur then. So we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Me? Welcome to the vice chair.
Yes.
Thank you.
Do you want to trade places, you two?
Well, certainly. Certainly.
Oh, we'll be
That
formal.
was short-lived.
We'll be
Thank you.
formal
That's
about
very
it, right?
sweet
See you
of you.
later, David. It was a pleasure.
I join it.
I can still reach you down there, though.
That was a quick demotion.
I know.
From like
It was.
precipitous ascent and decline.
Now you have to sit next to me.
Thank you, Dave. Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, and now we will move on to the approval of our agenda for today. And a motion is in order.
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda.
Can I second?
And a second, a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Moving on then, we've approved our agenda for today. Next item is public comment and audience response. I see some people here, but I don't think they're here for public comment, correct? Great, we'll close the public comment section and move on to the approval of our minutes from November 21st.
Can I make a motion to approve the minutes?
Please do. Everybody reviewed the minutes. We have a motion
Second?
and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, moving on, aye. To our action items for today. The first one being a special use site plan review submitted by Quabbin Associates. And this is for the construction of a trade center. Kelly Wyatt is up.
Yes. Still learning how to be a left-handed navigator on the computer, so I'd be a little slower than usual, but I apologize. I don't know that I need to go into too much detail on this one. Mr. Thompson, you're new, but this is an item that actually the planning board looked at back in September, October of 2022. And so the staff report from 2022 is still attached, so everybody could go back and read it and kind of just acquaint themselves with it. But as you mentioned, today we're here for a special use site plan review for the Trade Center, which is proposed to be located on the vacant lot just behind TW's Bait and Tackle. It's part of the Charles Simons subdivision, and it's lot 21A-1R. The site plan for this was reviewed and approved by the Nags Head Board of Commissioners on November 2nd, 2022. It was just a site plan approval. It wasn't a vested right approval. So much like what we dealt with the Inn at Whalebone, this application had 1 year to get a building permit or the site plan would expire. And so we're obviously beyond that 1 year, which would have landed on November 2nd, 2023. Section 4.15, time limits for site plan, zoning permit, building permit. I've included that in your packet. It's also up on the screen for anyone who's interested in reading it, but it essentially just spells out that 12-month time frame that you have to get a building permit or your site plan expires. We've taken it back through tech review, so planning department, fire, police, public works, and our town engineer have all looked at the resubmittal. It's the same submittal. They've all looked at it. Nothing in their codes have changed, so there's no reason to recommend anything more than what was recommended back in 2022, which is approval of the site plan as it's been submitted. And happy to answer any questions, or we can even go back through the whole submittal if you prefer. But I'll leave it at that and let y'all give me some direction.
Anybody have any questions for Kelly this morning?
No.
So the lot has been cleared, though. So that is the representation, the image is accurate to the first application. It isn't accurate right now.
Correct. So they did pull a land disturbance permit, I think in good faith, assuming that the building permit would follow, but it unfortunately hasn't. The expectation would be that that's coming in soon. I know that lot has actually kind of been stabilized with some grasses and things like that at this point. It's been sitting vacant for so long. But of course, if this is approved and they get back out there, the silt fence will go back up. So we'll ensure that that's taken care of.
So nothing's changed.
Nothing's changed? No. Anybody else, questions for Kelly? Comments?
I make a motion.
I'll entertain a
we
motion.
approve. We approve.
You make a motion to approve?
I do.
We have a motion on the floor
I'll second it.
and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you. Moving on then to consideration of text amendments submitted by Albemarle and Associates on behalf of Galassa Holdings to allow the long-term rental of units within existing hotels and motels. Kelly's still with us.
Yes, for the time being. So this, as you mentioned, this was it's a text amendment that was submitted by Albemarle and Associates on behalf of Galassa Holdings LLC. If approved, the text amendment would allow the long-term rental of existing hotel units within older hotels and motels. And you could see from the applicant's application, the proposal there was going to be any hotel, motel / cottage constructed prior to 1975. As part of their request, they have provided some draft definitions for long-term occupancy, hotel studio unit, and legacy hotel motel. It's in that proposed definition for legacy hotel motel that the 1975 date comes up. This was admittedly new to me, something like this, so it didn't take long to just do a Google search of, older hotels, motels being converted to long-term rental, and there were a lot of articles that popped up. So it is not a new trend. I think it's been going on for a while now. It's just not something that we've seen here or contemplated here in Nags Head to date. But there were a handful of articles, and perhaps you guys found some other ones that I just thought were interesting and could lend themselves to some good discussion here with the planning board. Our current definition of hotel is a structure containing hotel units, hotel suites, and or efficiency units with 24-hour on-site management and intended for transient guests on a rental basis. And it's the word transient that has them here before the planning board today, because we also have a definition for transient. It means occupancy by the same individual or owner for a combined period of no greater than 30 days in a single calendar year. So what they're seeking to do would be to allow the long-term rental of existing hotel units It's not site-specific at this time. It's broad, so the text amendment would apply to anything that's been proposed by the applicant. So what they've done is requested consideration of, I'll pull it up, I'll pull the application up for you there. To define legacy motels, hotels, and cottage court to allow long-term rental of existing hotel units. They provided definitions for the terms being used, noting it will provide flexibility in the rental of both transient and long-term existing hotel, motel, cottage court rooms, while still retaining the character of a legacy motel. It will allow existing motel, hotel rooms to be converted to studio-type rental units for longer-term occupancy than is currently allowed in these types of establishments, meaning the transient less than 30 days. The amendment would not allow this use in newer hotel or motels or any proposed future hotel or motel. So at this point, staff, as you've noted, has not made a recommendation. We wanted to just bring this to you today, knowing that the applicant would be here so that we could hopefully just have a really good conversation about this, maybe go through some of these questions that have been noted, to give staff direction on maybe the best way to approach drafting something like this, or to give information back to the applicant on how to move forward with it. So several questions. Accommodations, improvements for long-term rentals may require renovations to ensure that the occupant has what they need in terms of cooking facilities, a kitchen, things of that nature. And just noting that these things would all require permits. The long-term renters have different expectations of their facilities than a short-term rental of a hotel unit. Would a long-term renter be satisfied with what's being provided if there were no renovations made? Would a mixture of short and long-term stays alter the atmosphere or the ambiance of the hotel? Would it impact the experience for the transient hotel guest? I did note, again, it's not site specific, so we don't know what size of a hotel unit we're dealing with. But just as information, our current UDO states that a minimum hotel unit would be 300 square feet, and if it's an efficiency or a hotel suite, it would be 400 square feet. We do have requirements for the dormitory use, and it speaks to the area needed for the first sleeping area, and then area for common space, kitchen, etc. If you add that up, it comes to about 300 square feet. The draft multifamily dwelling ordinance that we're working on now, we've placed a minimum unit size of 800 square feet on that, just as information. And just looking at various articles and information that I could find, it looks like the average hotel room in the US is approximately 330 square feet. And the average apartment size is 880 square feet. So, you know, one of the articles that I provided talked about how, depending on the size of the hotel unit, once you consider long-term occupancy, you might be having to combine 2 hotel units to make it a sufficient size for a long-term occupant. Some other questions: does converting hotel units to long-term reduce the supply of needed hotel rooms? Does the management of long-term lease require different skills and resources as compared to that of short-term hotel bookings? Long-term tenants may pose challenges in terms of eviction, non-payment, property damage, etc. that could be more complex than what you would deal with if you're only concerned with transient guests. Does the conversion lead to parking concerns? If the conversion is allowed, would consideration need to be given to a new parking standard? And if so, what are your thoughts on that? current parking standard for multifamily is 2 spaces per dwelling unit. Current parking standard for hotel is 1 space if there are no kitchen facilities, and it's 1.2 spaces if there are kitchen facilities. So if we're thinking about older hotels and motels, we don't know what the status of that parking is now, whether it's conforming or non-conforming. More often than not, it's probably non-conforming, so. How is that affected if we consider long-term occupancy? The last little bullet point I have there was just noting that if a hotel or motel, and as we've noted, maybe it would be some of the older ones, are experiencing hardships, long-term rentals may provide steady and predictable income for the property owner, reducing the impact of seasonal fluctuations, which could be helpful for them. Long-term rentals may have lower operational costs. They're not worried about having a cleaning crew in there every day, doing laundry, replenishing laundry, and the level of maintenance required. So, as I said, there is no recommendation at this point from staff. I wanted to bring this to you and have the applicants available to just have a conversation and see where we go with this for next month. So, happy to answer any questions that you have. And we have Mr. DeLucia and Mr. Velasa here as well. So, I'm sure they'll be happy to.
Thank you, Kelly. Anybody have questions for Kelly? I have one, which is, do you have any feel for how many other legacy hotels this might affect?
I don't off the top of my head, but I will tell you Mr. DeLucia ran those numbers.
Oh, okay, good. Well,
And
you're going to
he-
get your...
Yeah, so he can tell you what that is.
Okay,
He put
good.
a little list together.
Great, okay.
Is there, maybe this is to the applicant as well, why only the older hotels? You know, why, if we were going to develop this standard, from your point of view, are we placing, are we creating some kind of disparity between older and newer? And is that disparity, is that a distinction without a difference?
I think that's something that we can talk about today. What was presented was what the applicant had requested.
So,
I think perhaps in light of, perhaps long-term rental isn't something that we would want in this new hotel, should that go up. That's just something to think about.
Because then it's an
okay, well,
apartment.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, to Molly's point, yes, then it's multifamily, it's an apartment-style multifamily.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear Molly's point. What did you say, Molly?
I just said, well, then it's an apartment building.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
I did a brief drive around, albeit I'm sure it's not all-inclusive. But if you take out the oceanfront legacy hotels, because I would be surprised if this would be financially beneficial to an oceanfront hotel. An oceanfront hotel in the summer is getting a higher rate than a between the highways hotel. If you take out the oceanfront hotels, we're not talking about very many properties at all. Well, those would be the two that yes, exactly. There are two, this one and the Tar Heel.
Right.
Well, Seahorse,
Yeah, perhaps Seahorse.
Seahorse also.
Okay.
I guess
Let's get-
I do have a question
For Kelly.
For Kelly.
And then I think it's, we'll get the applicant.
Is there, can you, and this is flying off the seat of your pants, what number of hotels are closing down for some portion of the season, of the off season?
I don't know that number.
Okay.
I apologize.
No, that's
Anything I said would just be a guess.
Yeah,
And
well,
Right.
I'm
Right.
asking, is it, because what I'm noticing rhetorically myself is that length of season is shorter now, and there are fewer that are doing it for any reason other than refitting. Is that accurate?
I believe so. I mean, I know, Dolphin shuts down for a period of time.
the season shorter or the closing season is
Well,
shorter?
their closing season is shorter, one, and they, the amount of time that they're doing it very often is just to
Like a month or two, not,
travel, get through the holidays, and fix things up that need it.
That's generally,
Yeah.
yes.
Okay.
okay.
Whereas, formerly, that would have been
Longer.
more of them doing it, longer doing it, et cetera, yeah. There's a-
Okay, any other questions for Kelly right now? Mr. DeLucia?
Come up in any other town on the Outer Banks?
So I did put a question out for on the NC Plan listserv, and I got a few comments back, none locally, but we have talked about perhaps something like this is happening in Manteo already. It's just not necessarily being regulated as far as we can tell.
Yeah,
Kelly,
well, I appreciate the opportunity to look at it and, go ahead.
That reminds me, I mean, are we regulating this? I mean, do we know that rooms are being occupied, 12 months of a year versus, 2 weeks or a week or whatever? I mean, are we checking on that stuff, I guess is my question.
I know the planning department has not been checking on it.
Okay.
And to my knowledge, the planning department hasn't received complaints or anything like that, or any reason for us to go check on it.
And one more question, is there a difference between this and some people call them SROs, single room occupancies? I mean, I was wondering, is there a distinction between those two?
That's something we need to look at
Okay.
as part of this.
I have a question for you. Is there anything that you know of that would preclude someone to rent a room for 12 months
No.
right now?
No. I mean, besides our own rules.
Definition, our
The
definition is
definition
less
of
than 30 days.
transient.
The revenue scheme, the taxation, where the money goes, et cetera, that is a question. If someone stayed for 29 days, checked out of one room, and then checked into another room at the same place, does that fit? Are they within the standards that exist?
What standards?
As what we're looking at now, not with
You mean the town?
previous to this application, if somebody stayed for 29 days in one unit at a hotel and then moved into the one next door, do they fit? So this could indeed go on and be within code.
Well, yeah, I would say yes, obviously, right? It says 30 days, but you mentioned taxation and finances, so that's a different story.
Right.
Because anything less than 90 days is taxable as short-term.
Yeah.
So that, full occupancy tax, 12.75%. But, so there's a lot to consider.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, you know what, let's hear from the applicant, right, I think, and then we
Yeah.
can move on to discussion. Thank you, Kelly.
Thank you.
Mr. DeLucia?
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays.
Thank you.
Indeed.
Hope
You
y'all
too.
have a Happy New Year. I'm John DeLucia, I'm from Albemarle Associates. I've been around here too long, I think now. Because I can remember when we didn't want any new hotels and we didn't want any new multifamilies, and what we got was some rather large houses that then we really decided we didn't want them. And so I've seen the progression in the town. I've seen what we've done over the years. I've been part of it, a big part of it in some ways. While we're here today, I want to introduce Lior Galassa. Lior is Mr. Israel Galassa's, one of his sons. He pretty much heads up a lot of their real estate that they own, both commercial and residential. And actually, Lior is going to come up and try to address some of these points because he wants to give you the perspective from the operation side of what they're doing right now. There's no secret. Mr. Galassa and the Galassa Holdings purchased all of Owen's properties. They purchased the restaurant, they purchased the oceanfront, and they purchased this motor court. The motor court was built in 1960, The oceanfront was built in 1966. Owens was built in 1947, the restaurant. Right now, the reason we came up with legacy motels is because of a suggestion by Kelly and staff when we met with them several months ago to discuss what we wanted to do with this piece of property. It is a legacy hotel. We've lost a lot of them here over the years because they couldn't be maintained. They weren't profitable, and building houses on the lots was more profitable for developers. Right now, and I pulled the 1975 out of the air, quite frankly. Actually, we probably should set that date to before we had an ordinance here, which was probably around the 70s. Right now, the hotels that would qualify under this ordinance would be the Comfort Inn South was built in 74, the Dolphin was built in 60, Cahoon's Cottages was 1960, the Roadway Inn was 1970, Owens Motor Court was 1960, Owens Oceanfront was 66, the Seafoam was 1961, Tar Heel was built in 1950, the Islander was 1973, the Blue Heron was 75, the first Colony Inn was originally built in 1932 and moved around a lot, but the Surfside Motel was built in 84 and 89, the two buildings there. The Sandspur was built in 55. The Oceanside Courts were 1955. The Holiday Inn was 1987, and the Colonial Inn was 1947. Some of those would not qualify. The Surfside would not, the Holiday Inn would not, the Blue Heron would not under this ordinance. And I agree with you, Mr. Mead, there's probably, I would not expect any of the oceanfronts to want to jump on this ordinance. And Dave, to your question on why not any hotel, that was kind of something that was suggested, I think, by Kelly early on when we were talking. If you want to build a hotel now, well, go build a multifamily if that's what you want. But when we have these older buildings, and buildings that we don't want to be torn down, that are non-conforming, that don't meet the standards for hotel rooms that people expect today. They still meet the standards for a hotel room, but they're smaller. They're one story, you don't have good views of the ocean from them. What could we do to benefit, a need that we all have right now here on the beach? And that's housing for service providers, for nurses, for policemen, for firemen, for people that work for the power company. Not everybody wants to rent a house with 5 and 6 other people. As far as the unit sizes, we're talking about buildings that are already built. So I mean, if we're gonna get into there, it's gonna have to be existing, units. We've met with the health department. The hotel, the motor court is a permitted hotel, but by the town and by the health department. The building wasn't in terrible shape, but the rooms were not in good shape. We walked through everything with the health department. They're in the process of remodeling and renovating, pulling all the old carpets out, repainting, fixing the bathrooms, making sure everything is brought up to standards. That motor court originally all had cooking facilities in all the rooms. Some of them were still there. Some of them had been converted to microwaves and small refrigerating units. The health department has allowed those units to all have their cooking facilities renovated. So we're in the process of doing that right now. The motor court is being prepared to continue to act like it's been acting. However, they see a need, we've seen the need for more affordable housing. I'm not saying that they're low rent affordable houses. The units are cool. They're about 350 square feet. They're existing. The building's non-conforming, it's over side setbacks. There's parking in the front, there's some parking in the back. Their drain fields are okay. Quite frankly, they don't necessarily, if we could find a way that they could use these units as studio apartments, I don't think they're really interested in the short term, so the overlap between short term and long term. You probably have more problems with the short term people with the long term people rather than the other way around. Because if you're living there, you're not going to want crazy screaming kids having a party in the unit next door. So that's what brought us here. And we didn't know where to go with this. Gary, you asked, is this happening in town? Yes, it's happening in town. There are other people that have been renting some of the small units year-round to either their employees or to other employees. I'd like to turn this over to Lior right now to go through some of these from what his experience and their experiences have been, because they've got a lot of rental units. They have, and I'll let him go into that. But that's why we're here today. And, is this a good idea? I mean, we think it's a good idea. I think it's better than us tearing the building down and building 8 or 10 big houses on there, personally. That would be easier for them. So, do you have any questions of me before I let Israel?
Just one quick question. What's the size of the units? What is the size you said?
About 350 is what they are now.
They're 350 each?
And how many are there?
Sorry. There's 29 actual units on the ground there, and then that two-story building on the south was actually an apartment. It's actually an apartment. That's where the chef for Owens was living.
And this is on the west side. All
And
this is.
this is all on the west side. We're not talking about the east side at all. Well, I mean, the east side would qualify, but their intention is to go ahead and keep that open as a hotel.
Okay.
As an open.
And this is probably for Mr. Glossa. Who's managing them? You are, okay. The rental management or whatever you would call it. Okay, great.
I'll leave these with you, Greg.
Nice to meet you. Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning. Just to start, I wanted to answer also a question that you had. So I don't think any motel owner or hotel owner would ever do this, what we want to do. It doesn't make sense financially, and it's probably not going to make sense to you, but we're actually going to be making 40% less income doing this. Now, believe it or not, it's not about the money here. We have 50 houses, apartments and houses that we own. 97% of our houses and apartments are rented to year-round residents. And we have 3 Airbnbs, 47 homes rented year-round. I could have easily, and I property manage all the real estate that we own, I could have easily had all 47 tenants leave and done Airbnb, and I would have made double on every single home. Easy double. So this is literally, I know it doesn't sound like it makes sense, but I'm blessed to be in a position where it's not really always about the money. You don't want to lose money, but it's not about becoming rich. It's about providing homes for people that need homes, businesses, employees, and that's literally what we do. And it's unknown because we don't advertise. We're not a Galasso Holdings LLC. No one even knows that exists. So everything is done through me, directly through me. So 47 homes, all employees or business homes that make half the amount that they could potentially make if they were Airbnbs. So to answer your question, I don't think anybody that owns a hotel would even want to do this, or owns a motel would want to do this. It doesn't make sense money-wise. So that's that point. I also wanted to just go over all these questions, if you don't mind, real quick. Let's see. Okay. So, do long-term renters have different expectations and needs compared to hotel guests? The answer is no. Simple answer, no. Could lack of amenities and services impact tenant satisfaction? There's not going to be a lack of amenities, so I don't think that's a no as well. Would a mixture of short and long-term stays alter the atmosphere, ambiance of the hotel, impacting the experience of the transient hotel guest? So the average hotel stay in the US is 1.8 days. So it's less than 2 days. So I think the most guests won't even know who's year-round and who's not. So I don't think it's really going to affect the ambiance of the hotel guests. If anything, it would affect the ambiance of the year-round renters because they have all that action going on in and out. I'm going to skip the next question because you guys already discussed that. Does converting hotel units to a long-term rental reduce the overall supply of needed hotel rooms to the extent that it affects visitation, tourism? So the answer is no, but not converting hotel units to long-term rental will reduce the supply of homes for local workers or people that live here year-round. So that answers that question. The supply of hotels there's a lot of hotels, there's a lot of Airbnbs. So many people sold their homes, as you know, or turned their homes over to Airbnb. If you were to walk into a vacation, into a real estate company 5 years ago, you would have 30 houses available for rent any given day, and now you get lucky if you find one. So it's definitely not affecting that, but eventually there will come a day, maybe in 20 years, where there will be no homes available for year-round people to rent or to own and live in, and tourists won't be able to come to the beach because most businesses will be closed because their employees don't have a place to live. So that's where it really affects tourism. So that question, that's that question. Does the management of long-term leases require different skills and resources compared to the managing short-term hotel bookings? No. It's the same exact management for long-term than it would be for short-term, and I'll get into it in a minute. Long-term tenants may pose challenges in terms of eviction, non-payment, or property damage, requiring legal involvement that may be more complex than dealing with transient guests. So, eviction. So we have at least 150 tenants. Let's just use that number as an example. So I've been managing the real estate for 8 years. 150 tenants. I've evicted one person. That's 0.0008% of my tenants evicted in 8 years. So the eviction is not an issue. Non-payment, that could happen with hotel business also, just like it can, but that's part of the eviction process. Property damage. There's a bigger chance your property will be damaged if it's rented as a hotel than it would be with an annual tenant. Both cases, you take a down payment or a security deposit, so that's not an issue. And the thing about year-round residents is we do background checks. So a guest at a motel or a hotel, I don't know who's staying at the motel or what they're capable of doing or who they are, but with a year-round resident, the reason why I only have one eviction in 8 years is because we do these background checks and we make sure that we have people that are clear to live in the complex. The parking, John's got that. There's no issue there. If the older hotels, motels are experiencing hardships, long-term rentals may provide a steady and predictable income stream for property owners, reducing the impact of seasonal fluctuations. All right. No one ever said hotels and motels were experiencing hardships, at least not in this case. So if we were to operate this as a hotel or motel, based on my numbers, which are minimum numbers, so it's on the low end, that 30-room motel would make at least $900,000 gross, 2024. That's definitely not a hardship. Now, steady, predictable income for a year, long-term, yes, I agree. You have steady, predictable income, but with a motel, you have steady, predictable income over a 3-month span. And I'm only using it as a 90-day basis, by the way. That's why I say it's at least $900,000. So most people would prefer to have steady, predictable income over a 3-month period than a year. which in this case, it applies for both scenarios. And then it says, in addition, long-term rentals may have lower operational costs compared to a hotel. So that's not necessarily true. Reduced cleaning. When I charge for a motel or a hotel, the price for the cleaning is already included in the rate. My only responsibility is to make sure that the cleaner shows up to work. So if my room goes for $300 a night and the cleaning per room is $40, I'm charging, you actually profit on cleaning, but let's just say I charged $340 a night, that covers the cleaning fee. So the cost there stays the same. If anything, running it as a motel, you profit on that end, just like an Airbnb. So if you have a house that's $500 a night, and then your cleaning fee is $150, you could charge an extra $20, $30 a night per night, and you could profit on the cleaning side. You're paying the cleaner $150, but you're really getting $250 overall, the overall stay. Laundry, it's going to be the same thing, because I spent the second half of the summer, I spent I think it was like $400 a week on laundry, which is like linens, pillowcases, and all that stuff. So $400 a week, let's say on a 12-week basis is $4,800 a year on laundry. We plan on buying washer and dryers for all these rooms. So not for every room, but it'll be like let's say 10 units. That costs like 20 grand. So that's not a cost difference. And maintenance expenses are the same. If it's a hotel guest or if it's a tenant, it'll be the same exact cost. And that's it, really. That's all those questions that I wanted to go through one by one.
Thank you. I have a quick question. A lot of our concern would be for summer help, like lifeguards and people that come down here and work in the service industry while they're on college break or whatever. So would yours just be for long-term, or would it be also for, like, say, 90 days?
So I would like it to be minimum 1 year, and I'll tell you why. So people come to work for 90 days, but they're in and out. You have more than enough people that are trying to be here for a year, but they can't. There's nowhere to live. Like I said, 7 years ago, you could easily find a house to live in. But now, they don't have a place to live. So I'd prefer a 1 year minimum. And I believe, so I have a waiting list. I have a business waiting list and an individual waiting list, meaning people that the business owners are renting. There are 100 people each on each list. So these units could rent instantly for people that are year-round. There's a higher demand for year-round residents than 90 days. Because the 90 days people, they could find a place to live, they could rent a room, they could even Airbnb a house. They have many options. But if you want to live here year-round, there's really zero options. Maybe.
I have a question. So year-round renters usually have a lot of stuff. You know, like they have surfboards and campers and tents and grills and baby equipment and swing sets and slides. Like, where does all that go when you're living in 300 square feet?
Right. So no one's keeping their swing set indoors anyway. Right.
Right. But
So
stuff, like
right,
renters
that's
have
fine.
stuff.
Well, let's just
Yeah.
say swing. Let's just talk about swing sets first. If I have a swing, I'm not going to have a swing set if I'm living in a house with 20 other people sharing a room with 3. There's no option for a swing set. So, in my clientele, I'm aiming for obviously not a family of 5, but it's going to be maybe a family of 2 or a couple with a kid. And believe it or not, we have plans, gorgeous plans, spacious also, measured and everything, where you could have a bed or 2, full kitchen, a TV, 2 chairs and a table. It's amazing. Now, there's no room, storage, we have storage on the premises. We could figure that out, no problem. Clothes, we have dressers, we have closets in the rooms, or we're gonna have. So there's not gonna be any issue with that. Obviously, anything bigger than that is not gonna fit. So.
This is an interesting proposal and actually begs a litany of questions. You say there are 29 units, is that correct?
There's 30, 29 of the same size approximately, and then the one unit upstairs is like 700 square feet.
Okay, so
30 units.
29 are basically 325, 350.
350, yeah.
Okay. Is your intention for all of those units, 350, to be a one-bedroom unit?
So some will be, the rooms are kind of designed differently. So some of the rooms you could fit one king, so 4 rooms, you could fit one king, and the other 25 rooms, you could put a queen and a twin or 2 fulls. And 6 out of the 29, could fit 2 queens. So 6 out of the 29, 2 queens, and then 4 out of the 29 only king, and then the leftover 19 are either a queen and a twin or 2 fulls. The difference between those two is 10 inches. So
What do you envision to be the rent?
so it's not going to be affordable housing as a title, but it's going to be housing that's affordable. It's going to be, I was thinking between $1,400 to $1,700, and that includes utilities. And I know that they're going to rent. I got that. If we do this, it'll be $550,000 gross income versus the $900 if it was a motel, and that's based on those numbers. And those numbers are where they need to be, and they would rent very fast.
Many of these legacy hotels, similar, that were built years ago. One of the reasons they shut down in the winter is because they are not winterized properties. There's no insulation, pipes would freeze, et cetera, et cetera. How is that addressed in this case?
We've been open, the motels are open now. We haven't had any issues. I don't know.
Can you expand a little bit on the cooking facilities? Somebody
Yeah.
said you were working on,
I have a plan in my phone, but I'll just explain it to you. So if it's like if every room is, let's say, shaped like a box, a square, then it would be.
which they mostly would be, right?
Hmm?
They basically mostly are shaped like a box.
Yeah, kind of like
Okay.
maybe like a rectangle, I guess. It's
Okay.
They're longer than they are wider.
Mm-hmm.
So when you walk in most cases, on the left-hand side would be the bed. And then on the right-hand side towards the back corner, you would have a 10-foot kitchen that comes out 24 inches off the wall, and it's 10 feet wide. And that has a sink, an oven, microwave on the wall, cabinetry, and with 4 feet walking space between the kitchen and the other wall to go to the bathroom. The TV would be mounted on the wall with a table and 2 chairs underneath it, which would leave more than 3 feet between the table and the bed to walk. And then you have a closet that's already built into the room, and we have room to put a dresser or the tall,
Like an armoire or something.
Chest of drawers?
And refrigeration, did I miss?
and a refrigerator. That's part of
Full
the
size, what type?
So I don't think they need like it's not going to be a mini fridge, and it won't be a huge fridge. It'll be 59 inch tall, so almost 5 feet,
Mm-hmm.
27 inches wide, and also like 25 inches deep, and that's part of the 10 feet. So it's a great size, freezer, refrigerator, and then the ovens also would be 24 or 27 inches wide instead of
When with a
30.
range top?
Yeah.
Okay.
They have like the perfect size, which is like 27 inches wide, I think, and then same height, electric top, and then the microwave would also be mounted on the wall 24 inches wide.
So the size of the whole kitchen area,
10 feet wide and 24 inches deep.
Okay, so it's taking up some space in the 350.
It's really actually a very,
It's efficient.
it's still spacious, but of course, yes,
Right.
it's not the most spacious.
Right.
thing, but it's actually a better situation than most people have it now, where they're living, and this is how it is now. We have 5, 6 people living in a room. living with the landlord, sharing a kitchen. Everybody has their own kitchen. It's nice, it's new, it's fresh, and that's all you need, really. This isn't where you're gonna go and hang out and invite like 20 people over and hang out in your living room, but you're just gonna have a place to live for a good price, across the street from the beach, and it's gonna be really nice stuff, quartz countertops, gorgeous inside. It's gonna be nicer than most people's, people are gonna like this more than living in a room with a million people.
I have a question.
What's the laundry, you said that everyone would have access to laundry, or
Yeah.
some would have
So
access?
we have like 3 sections in the building where we could put, washer and dryers. So my plan was to put like 5 or 6 in each room, like a big room in the corner. It's like a maintenance room for the cleaners. So I would say it would probably be like 10 washers, 10 dryers total. And they'd be good commercial, maybe commercial units, I don't know, but it would be comfortable for the tenants to use and share.
Okay, so for the tenants, not for the cleaner, you said for the cleaners, for the tenants.
Currently, it's for the cleaners,
Right,
but they only have a washer in there. We send everything out to
right,
be washed, but it would be for the tenants.
okay.
And one section of the building would have 1 space of 10 units, and the other section would have maybe like access to like 4 or 5, whatever we could fit.
And they would not be coin operated or whatever, they'd be,
If you don't want me to do coin, I won't do coin.
well, I'm just
It's up
curious.
to you.
So I know a lot of our discussion here has been, about long-term housing shortages here. And we've been discussing it a lot. And we've been very concerned about keeping the price down, like on these, so that people can actually afford to do these. What guarantee can you give that you're not gonna raise it, or you're gonna try to keep it somewhat affordable for people?
I'll be honest with you, I'm going based on the supply and demand. The only reason why rents are so high today, annual living, is because of the fact that there are so many vacation rental homes and Airbnbs.
Right.
That's what drove the prices up in the first place. Now, I used to rent the house 10 years ago for $1,200 a month with my girlfriend, 3-bedroom house, my ex-girlfriend. It was $1,200 a month. Now you rent the same house for $2,500. So I'm in that industry, so I could tell you that the houses that I'm renting, a 3-bedroom house, I'm renting for $2,000 a month, right? Airbnb, you get double. So I can't promise you that I won't increase the rates, but I promise you that the rates that I charge are fair rates, because I'm currently making 50% less than what I could be making if I was doing it Airbnb-wise. And I have the addresses and the leases to prove that. It's not just a made-up thing. So if there's one person that's not gonna charge expensive rates, it's me. And I'm not gonna charge $900 a month either.
No, but.
People are paying $1,000 per room now to rent. So the rates I have they're not, I didn't just make up the number. I know it's fair, and that's why I know it would rent within a day or two, all 30 units, because it's fair.
I just
How-
would hate to see it go, after we do this, and if we approved it.
Right.
And
Well-
then you rent for a year or two,
I
and then
think
you
what
go
Ray's
up like
is-
30% on your rent.
I would
You know
never
what I'm
do
saying?
that. I would never, so I'll tell you, I'll give, again, I have the leases and the tenants to prove it. If I could bring all my tenants here, I would. Not one of them would tell you that I ever increased their rent significantly enough for them to leave. So over the past 8 years, I told you I evicted one person. 98% of my tenants renew their leases, commercial or residential. So not even in the commercial market did I increase their rates
You haven't
significantly.
at all?
Of course I did. There's a 3% maybe maximum. Some are flat, no increases. But I would never, like, if you rented an apartment for me for $1,400 a month, I would never the next year raise it to $1,600. To me, it doesn't make sense. I do a good gentle increase, and if you're not okay with it, I'll say okay, no problem. But we'll keep you the same this year. But next year, I'll take you up to $1,500, and then the year later, like just to catch you up. So I always work with my tenants. There's no, not one person will ever leave because I increased their rent too much too fast.
But the town has to look at allowing this throughout the town, not just with your
Right.
property.
Right.
I think we
have to
need
look at
to-
every property, so we have to think about somehow to,
Yeah, we need to remember that we're
it's not
looking,
just you, like, somebody, if we allow this, then somebody else could come do it, and we don't know what they would work like, so we gotta make some parameters.
I understand that, but I also know that I promise you, like I said, nobody that owns a motel or a hotel will transform their business to a year-round resident. It's crazy, I'm telling you. The numbers are factual. 40% less gross income. Go ask anybody. Ask the person that bought the Blue Heron Motel, or all these Indian families buying the motels and hotels. Tell them, we want you to transfer your hotels and motels to here. They would laugh at you.
Are you doing
To-
this for your employees?
No.
At your, just anybody? Like, so,
I'm doing it for anybody that passes my background check, that needs a place to live, and that's it.
I think it's important that we remember that this is a text amendment, like you were saying, to change, throughout the town. It's not a site-specific, and we appreciate your information this morning and being here and explaining what's going on, but we need to get back to discussion on the text amendment at hand. So does anybody else have questions for Mr. Galassa, specific questions about the text
There
amendment?
is one question I was asking earlier, and that has to do with the impacts of short-term versus long-term rentals. I mean, you're in the business, you know what you're doing, so as an example, what do you see as the impact, the differences in long-term versus short-term rental impacts? To the adjacent property owners, of course.
Right. So short-term, you mean motel?
Well, yes, I'm talking about, if you take these motel rooms and you make them year-round, what is the difference in the impacts that those year-rounders would have versus somebody who's renting on a daily, weekly basis?
Correct. So the short-term renters have many options, many places to live, and they come here for a short period of time, but they go to eat, they go shopping, and when they go eat and when they go shopping, they're dealing with people that live here year-round, if they can find a place to live. So if we create long-term housing for people, that's going to allow the business owners and the employees to live on the beach, for businesses to make it and succeed, so that tourists, short-term renters, could go to these places. Like I said, in 20 years from now, if we continue in this, half the businesses are going to close down, and then tourism is really going to drop significantly. So that's really the main difference, and that's why we do this. And it's not because of me, my father, thank God. I'm blessed to be in a position where it's not always about making the money. It's really about the people in this case.
So in your opinion, the impacts are going to be very positive?
Very positive, only positive.
Okay.
Can't be negative.
Look, just tell me what you think. This is the question I asked for Kelly, but I'll ask you since you're in the business, and that is the differences between what you're proposing and single-room occupancies, SROs. And SROs basically have got a negative connotation to them. I mean, they're not something that people would enjoy seeing. So I'm like, my question to you is, you understand where I'm coming from. Okay. I just wanted to make sure you got it.
Of course.
Yeah, just to add to that, Gary. Some of our clientele that have been coming to the beach for a long time come down with the intent to just break loose. And you know that. We all know that. We've seen it before. Leor had mentioned that I don't think that they want necessarily to have short-term and long-term. I think that the facility would turn out to be year-round, almost all the rooms, maybe one or two would be
not a
vacant
combination of the
sometimes.
two.
I would rather not.
So, and I would dare say that there would probably be more problems with the short-term renters in this facility, and in some of they're the older facilities too. So we're getting clientele that is willing to put up with the older stuff, as opposed to some of our newer tourists that would look at a room like that and say, well, it doesn't have a jacuzzi in it, it doesn't have this, it doesn't have that. I think their management style, and Leor could speak to this more than I can, they, over the years, They've learned how to deal with anyone that becomes a problem. I mean, they don't want problems. They don't want the rest of the tenants having a problem. In most of the locations of these heritage hotels, they're in the business zone. They've got businesses on both sides of them, or they've got similar. So, to try to keep some of our old buildings and keep them viable, we have to, we can't change the room sizes. They were built in 1960. The parking is the parking right now. Now, if it needed more parking, then, a business might need to, or an owner might have to find some more to make sure that it could be converted. So I think the impact to the neighbors is probably much worse as a hotel for those 3 to 4 months of the year when everyone is raging down here, especially in these older hotels because of the type of clientele that they bring. And Leroy was absolutely right. I mean, you don't do background checks on somebody coming and rent a hotel room for a couple of days. So you can control it a little bit better, I think, as more long-term rentals.
Okay, thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else have questions? Specific questions, and we can discuss? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
We appreciate your information. Okay.
Just one question, and I'm addressing this to Kelly, and that is, has this question going before the technical review committee, has all the department heads kind of looked at this, the police, the fire, have they all looked over this and said, yeah, I mean, what is their opinion of it, I guess is my question.
So I did send this out to our TRC group. I got very few responses back. I take that to mean that most didn't have an issue with it. The only response that I did get back is obviously some concerns, I guess, with our police department, that this type of scenario would not generate any more issues than may otherwise come up. Obviously, as part of the conversion, if this were to be approved, anything related to trade permits, mechanical, electrical, that's going to go through our building inspector. Any changes of any significance will go back through TRC. But just the text amendment alone, we didn't get a lot of concerns.
Okay. Thank you. What are we thinking?
My concern is that we're creating, while I think I understand what's going on here, that we're creating a standard so that these structures are still relevant. But the question is, to me, if someone is coming in and is building something new or retrofitting an existing property, repurposing an existing property, they're going to be able to get multifamily at fewer square feet.
Like if we require something new, they have to build it bigger and we have stricter standards, but for this, we're gonna allow
Yeah.
a smaller standard.
And where I don't really, I don't necessarily have an issue with that, rhetorically, I can see it getting a little out of control. Then the other side of it is, if this is gonna happen, some of the standards that exist, some of the things that exist on these properties might fall away. You're not going to need commercial lighting standards. Maybe they don't want area lights as much. Maybe they don't want as many lights on the building so they're all coming on at the same time. So it's going to go dark, and that might be great for the residents. It's a real shifting scale for this, and there's a lot unforeseen in it, but the biggest thing that I get into is 1 space inside, 2 space outside. What's the difference between this and a townhouse?
Good point.
And if I'm a new property, I buy an existing building or I'm building a new building, I can make $1,500 to $1,700 per unit at 350 square feet with apartment-sized appliances. The nose is in the tent. Why shouldn't that be a standard? And so, where this might get out of control, and this is not specifically your case, but it might be another case, is density. It will push the density level up if you get into this kind of a thing. So,
Could we regulate density by saying that maximum of 2 occupants in these units? I mean, is that something the town can do?
And then you've got the parking issue. I mean, there's one parking space per room. So is parking an issue? And
well, and,
Well, you're gonna-
but where this also could go is the majority of these units are single or 2-story structures. If someone builds and they lift an entire structure and they put in a new first floor, then density again, more density, more. And what my concern is that if this, I'm wondering if this just there's a lot of questions that are unanswered. It needs more review.
Right.
Can I
And we
ask
need
Mr.
to-
Galassa a
I
question?
think we need to give staff some guidance on, what we want to look into.
Is it too late to
um,
ask a question about Mr. Galassa?
No, I don't think so.
Is it, would these be rentable if they were required to just have 1 occupant because of the parking situation? Like, could we regulate it to 1 occupant and
So-
still them be rentable?
So John was gonna mention before, we have more than enough parking as is, with the property next door. There's an extra 40 spots available. We could also build parking in the back of the property, which is basically on the highway, because there's an extra drain field that's not in use, and we could create parking there. But yeah, technically, if parking was an issue, which is not, I would be able to rent it to 1 person per unit, but just like every other house on the beach, I'm not gonna go around investigating if they have somebody sleeping over for a week or 2, or maybe for the year, I don't know. But most of the houses on the beach now, as far as density is concerned, I mean, because of this issue, we're just trying to solve a little issue, which is provide a little bit more housing for some people. We're not gonna solve the problem with this motel,
Yeah.
but we're just trying to solve a little bit of a problem, a small percentage of it. And all the houses on the beach are rented, as you all know. You got 5 people in a room, 4 people in a room, paying $500 each. Everything's done illegally, right? You have people Airbnb-ing their basements. So the whole beach is turning into that. At least here, it's a 1-floor, 30-room complex, clean, organized, legal.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I like this concept. I like what we're hearing today because it addresses a problem that is chronic right here. And I think there's a lot of different things that we need to look at, parking and whatever. But I think we need to give it some traction. I think we need to really look at it honestly as a potential solution to a
Part of the
long-term
solution.
problem that we're trying to address. So I would like to keep the discussion going.
I agree.
I agree. The only thing that I would like to throw in the caveat category on this is to try to do this where density doesn't start to weigh too much on that side of the balance, we're in discussion now, so that we are looking at creating a text amendment which will allow that ordinance to cover the entire town. So and maybe something for that would be to limit this to number of stories. Because if somebody, it seems like this is going to be hard to contain in the more historical or the more repurposing older structures into this new function.
Well, I agree with you, but I just want to point out that if Mr. Glass's comments where I'm making more money
Yeah.
renting this out, and I'm losing money by doing what I'm doing here for a greater need. Point being is, how many hotel owners are want to follow suit?
That's kind of exactly, you know, if you
Right.
if we created these standards, what I imagine is an opt-in opportunity. What would that look like?
Right.
Exactly.
And if you know, and the numbers that spook me are 350 square feet per 1.2 parking spaces existing, under existing code.
Well-
And those two numbers against each other, you know, that understand what that is. But when we start to get into the next text amendment, which will be new construction to that new standard.
Does this relate, go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, I was just gonna say, at this point, I mean, we can take what we've heard and craft something. I mean, I've made some notes.
Mhm.
There's the conversation that Mr. Thompson brought up, and I think Mr. Galassa agreed, that it's very unlikely that the oceanfront hotels, motels are going to take advantage of this. So perhaps that's one exclusion in and of itself.
Or take the date back.
Talk
As-
about the date, we can, you know, a minimum 350 square feet. Have language in there, you're either one or the other, you're either short-term or you're long-term, and
Right.
you can't mix
Oh,
the
I
two.
think that's important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That might eliminate some that want to do it, because there might be some places that say, oh, that sounds great, I'd like to do 10 units and keep the others short-term, but that will
But what
change
about
that
like,
dynamic.
just for devil's advocate, there
Yeah.
could be a hotel that really doesn't have anywhere for their cleaning staff to live and they need to rent 3 units long-term to their cleaning staff. Like, is that a problem? Do we have a problem with that?
So there's actually terminology in our hotel ordinance
For the
for dormitory use,
Oh, okay,
and it's very minimal.
okay.
The other thing that we
Speak-
haven't done yet is to talk about minimum housing. I just wanna make sure we're meeting all the minimum
Right.
housing.
And don't we have dormitory type regulations? I mean, this feels a little bit more like that than,
I think the dormitory talks about it has to be associated with university. I think that's in the ordinance.
No, it might have been the previous, but with the CDC building there on 158, we made some changes to that. I can pull it up here now if we need to. I think this would be a little different
yeah,
than,
but,
than that, but it can be a starting point to the parking. At this point, there's nothing that says it can't be 2 spaces per unit.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, the 1.2 is really geared more towards
Yeah.
the hotel with or without a cooking facility, so,
and the request mentions year-round or seasonal. I know you mentioned that you would be leaning towards year-round for your reasons or what have you, but I'm not sure that we would want to be so limited. I think this might be a great opportunity for seasonal workers
So
in some situations.
so-
Again, doing a text amendment that's going to affect the whole town.
over 90 days.
Yes, or at least 90 days.
And Dave, you know, your comment on density, I mean, right now you might have a mom and dad and 3 kids. You might have 5 people staying in the room where, as opposed to if you're renting them for year-round uses, you might have 1 or 2, so, or you might have 2 families
I-
coming down and renting one room.
I understand I understand where you're talking
Yeah.
about. What I'm looking at is I'm looking at the multifamily and how it compares and contrasts with this. And I think that if we try to make this, there's no way, I don't think we can look at where we're going with multifamily without looking at this. And I understand this, from my personal point of view, a lot of our staffing, housing situations, the complications of them are, rhetorically speaking, the people that I'm aware of who live here now, who are younger than me, or my age, or older than me, used to live in people's houses. And those houses now are no longer available. That's a complication, agreed. The market has become greedy because there is opportunity for it. That length of season, et cetera. Now, this fits that, and great, good for you, good on you. But we've got to build this in language where they're looking at the other side of that balance and they want to make. And what is that, how are we casting the dice in that direction? Mm-hmm. So that's a caveat, and I don't know really what that looks like. It seems like this stuff's already going on along a lot of different directions.
Yeah.
And
I mean, it gives, it gives another option. I mean, we don't have one-bedroom apartments here. And the reason we didn't do that for so many years is because the health department said you had to build septic for 2 bedrooms, whether you had 1 bedroom or not. Well, those rules are getting ready to change the first of the year. And they're changing because people that wanted to do an ADU were being told, well, you have to put a 2-bedroom septic system in for that. And it didn't fit. But, looking at the diversity of different types of units. My youngest daughter, Hannah, cleans swimming pools, and she's renting a room in Collington, and there's 5 people living in the house. And she's paying $500, $600, $700 a month just for her bedroom. And I mean, I think she would be the type of person that would rather get out of a house with 5 people and have her own little place, keep her cats. I don't know if anyone would let them keep cats. But, those are the type of people.
She would be priced out of something like this.
Yep. She may or may not.
Right, okay, but I'm just
Maybe
saying,
have a roommate.
what she's paying now, so.
Oh, she'd be paying more than what she's paying now,
Right,
absolutely.
right.
But what's the benefit?
Kelly, do you think you have what you need for us to continue this discussion?
We've had a lot of really great discussion.
Okay.
So I do think we can bring something back. And we'll obviously extend the conversation and talk with y'all as we draft it.
Okay,
But we'll plan to have something back in June.
Can I just say
Okay.
one thing?
sure.
One last thing. Most multifamily dwellings currently, even brand new construction, they're all going to be Airbnbs. There are
Well,
90% of them are going to be Airbnbs. There's no question. That whole brand new, the 8 buildings, the big, huge white buildings on the ocean, across the street from the ocean, in Kill Devil Hills, it's all going to be Airbnbs. People are going to buy them and they're going to rent them Airbnbs. And if not, they're going on under the table. People are just renting their rooms and whatever. It's all done illegally. So this is just a nice way of doing it legally, I think. That's all.
thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your time. Okay,
Thank you all.
Bye.
thank
you.
you, John. Good to see you.
Happy holidays.
Okay, moving on then, please, to consideration of various text amendments as it relates to multifamily development.
Okay. There's really no need to give an introduction to this. I think everybody knows what it is by now. And I'll try not to be as long-winded and boring about it as I usually am. I'm just gonna put the ordinance up here, and I'm just gonna go through the bullet point list of the changes that we've made since it was last before you. And noting that the green highlights are things that Attorney Robert Hobbs had looked at and question mark, maybe go back and look at this, consider something different. So, the yellow highlights are things that we made revisions to as staff based upon planning board conversation. So the first item, the proposed definition for multifamily dwelling, been revised from means a structure to means dwelling units under one roof or portion thereof. So, yes, it is a structure, but a multifamily dwelling is going to be 3 or more dwelling units. So, just clarifying that. The next thing we have, townhouse means a single structure consisting of 3 or more dwelling units, each with no other dwelling unit or portion of a dwelling unit directly above or below. And each dwelling unit shall have direct ground access to the outdoors. Still noting that townhouse use shall be considered multifamily dwelling use. The next 2 items were, I don't know if you remember, but under the definition of workforce housing, we just had a lot of A, B, C, D, E. So I thought it would be easier to break that out into its own definition, as opposed to just having a page worth of criteria for workforce. So principal place of residence, we pulled that out and just stated that it means a home or place in which one's habitation is fixed and to which one has present intention of returning after departure or absence therefrom. Last meeting, we talked about qualified person being added in there. So a qualified person means a person working, employed in Dare County, North Carolina. This shall include any person that has an internship or works remotely for an employer within Dare County. So look at that one. I know there's a lot of conversation there. We eliminated educational opportunities. That was a little too vague. We talked about how internships are predominantly, there's a work portion of your internship as well as an educational portion. And we made sure that if you're working remotely for an employer in Dare County. And then under our workforce housing definition, we have that housing is intended to be the principal place of residence, which we have a definition for at least one qualified person. So the way that's written, there has to be one qualified person within the unit, and of course their spouse, partner, child, whatever can also be there, and that's fine. The next item, dwelling units intended for workforce housing shall be properly deed restricted to ensure compliance with the criteria. The town of Nags Head shall be the sole express beneficiary of the deed restriction, and the restrictions must appear in the deed as well as in the recorded declaration establishing the development. So that was some language that was recommended by the attorney that we added in there. Nothing in this definition shall preclude employers from purchasing workforce housing units to provide accommodations for their employees, provided the employees work within Dare County and the dwelling unit is the employee's principal place of residence, even if owned by the employer. And that was, again, recommended by the town attorney. For section 7.5, this wasn't highlighted, but obviously we've already said townhouse is multifamily, so we'll scratch through townhouse. Saying here that a multifamily dwelling unit, that goes back to what the attorney had recommended. As far as revisions to the table, lot width is the same, side area. Last meeting we decided on no maximum side area. Setbacks are unchanged. Density is unchanged. Height is unchanged, maximum of 35 feet, maybe increased to 42 feet with the use of an 812 roof pitch or greater. Gary, I did want to note, I went back to the old chapter 48 of the town code where we talked about 28-foot top plate, and we still had our 35 max. So I didn't change that in here, just because we still capped it at 35 regardless, or 42. All right, so for the buffer requirements, talking about your transitional protective yard, that last little item, and section 10.93.3.3.3 of the UDO, that's where we talk about this being a high impact use. The large multifamily would be a high impact use. And if that use is immediately adjacent to any residential, existing residential development or residential zoning district, it would have that increased buffer yard requirement for the 25 feet. And then that was included further down in the attachments, so we'll get to that. Architectural design requirements. Gave two options here, and hopefully we can talk about it just a little bit and decide which direction we prefer. Option A, which is what you saw last month, which is a multifamily dwelling, must acquire a minimum of 150 architectural design points based upon criteria established in the Town of Nags Head Design Guidelines. That was an attachment in your package. It was where we had the criteria for porches and roof pitch, gable dormers, shed dormers, and then there was a point system associated with it. Then I also gave you this other option, which is option B, that multifamily dwelling buildings shall meet the requirements of Article 10, the commercial design standards. That was also in your packet. It was a lot of reading. I hope everybody got through it. As you can see, the design, the 150 design points, it's very straightforward. These are the elements we want. These are what we need you to do and the points that you get for them. The commercial design standards offer a little bit more flexibility. I feel like they do. At the end of the day, they're pushing you towards the same design, but it gives you a little bit more flexibility. So I didn't know if maybe we had a chance to talk about that, and do we feel like these townhome clusters would be better suited with providing strict architectural elements and meeting a 150 standard, or kind of going this other route where we're hopefully going to get to the design we want, but it's more of a process of standards and then guidelines that we would like for you to do, but they're not required. So we can go back to that. That'll be a biggie, unless you want to talk about it now.
Let's talk about it now.
Perfect.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and scroll down to that section. Okay, so here's the commercial design standards, if we want to have this up for anybody to comment on. Oh, that doesn't look good. Oh, there we go.
Looks like copy.
Yeah, so this is the section where it says that projects with less than 10,000 square feet may use the 150, but if you're over that, you're going to have to use that commercial design standard. This is for commercial buildings. I feel like since we're creating this new standard for multifamily, we have the opportunity to say how we want multifamily to comply. Any thoughts?
I feel like if we're building this, we should shoot really high.
Right.
Let's go for it.
Yeah.
Why can't we say yes and?
So the other piece of this is, I guess short of it being the small multifamily, well, all of it, small and large, we have as special use. So they're both going to be coming to Planning Board and Board of Commissioners. The small, depending on how many units, may not trigger sketch plan, but keep in mind that that's part of it as well. So maybe we require any multifamily development unit, whether it's small or large, go through the sketch plan process so that you're seeing it.
I think that certainly
I
makes
think
sense.
that's a good idea.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, especially because if we build this code and something sneaks in, if something unforeseen sneaks in and optimizing some angularity that we didn't appreciate, yeah.
We've got to,
We can all talk about
Stop
the aforementioned, and it's completely the pizza oven that was on a plan. And, you know, and it made it really clear what an intention was. So, yeah.
So reworking, so
Yes.
amending this so that small and large multifamily, both are special use, and we want sketch plan first.
Yeah.
So in the very beginning of design, they're having the conversation here with the board as to what they want to see. I think in that case, perhaps the architectural design standard would be that you meet the requirements of Article 10 commercial design standards. We can also ask them to provide a point tabulation
right.
to see how much. There could be a scenario where they have met the commercial design standard, only have 130 points, but it still looks like Nags Head architectural
Right.
design.
Right.
Where the opposite is true with the point system sometimes.
Right.
You can get those points, and it somehow still doesn't quite look the way we'd like it to look.
I think that this allows us, this allows for more interaction on what products will be built, you know, as compared to, yeah, I think this makes sense.
Okay. Great.
See, wasn't that so hard?
I agree. And this should have been yellow, I apologize, but for accessory uses, we added some of those for both the large and the small. So over here for large, we were thinking that the types of accessory uses we may want to allow is shed, not multiple sheds, shed singular, one shed for storage. Pool, one pool, not every cluster gets its own little pool, but just one pool as an amenity. Walls and fences, as we've said, that would be a conversation at the phase of whether or not somebody can have a portion of that common, what we would consider common space as part of their enclosure. That would come under the covenants or the deed restrictions, things of that nature. But we didn't want to exclude it in case it comes down the road, so it's in there as a potential accessory use. And then private parks and playgrounds, speaking to those amenities that we would like to see, especially at the larger. And then for the small, also a shed, So you're talking about maximum of 6 residential units. So is that where we feel like we want a shed? Is that where we feel like we need a pool?
Kelly,
Yes.
quick question about sheds. If a multifamily project comes in and maxes out coverage, lot coverage,
Mm-hmm.
and if they max it out to, and then someone says, oh, I'm gonna put a shed in now.
No.
No, you can't, you'll say no to that. Well, I'm just,
Absolutely.
I mean,
Lot coverage, if lot coverage is max,
well, that's what I mean. If it's maxed out, then
Right.
I don't know if there's any allowances for such things or not.
there is, no, there isn't. It would have to meet any new structure on the property, any accessory structure would have to meet lot coverage, setbacks. If they did have the lot coverage to accommodate it, it's more than likely going to trigger stormwater management, which they'll then have to do a design for as well, so.
So they can have multiple sheds on their property?
No, we,
One shed.
we-
One shed?
One shed.
One shed. They have 6 units and they have one shed?
correct.
If they have space.
Okay, I was just questioning, that's all.
Yeah.
Can we throw in stormwater management as a, regardless of whether it meets the coverage standard to be allowed for, that we build that in?
We can right now, as part of a new development, it would have to go through the stormwater design process, but if, say, it was developed and a year later, they came back and said, well, you know, we've got 300 square feet of lot coverage left over, we want to put this 200 square foot shed right now essentially our ordinance says that it would have to be an addition of 500 square feet to trigger stormwater review. So I'm assuming the consensus is regardless of square footage, you want an accessory structure to provide stormwater management. Is there a 100
Yeah.
square feet rule,
Yeah.
a 300 square feet
Yeah.
rule?
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I do too.
And, you know, and I'm even going so far as to say, let's say that there is a major landscaping addition, which could definitely affect stormwater management, that would be something that I would be interested in. Any modification of an existing or that would cause an issue. Addition of fill.
So land disturbance.
Yes. So with land disturbance, you trigger this. It's one of
At least a review.
Yeah.
Perhaps
Right.
not a full-on.
yeah, and
Plan, but a
just because my biggest concern is that something that is unforeseen to us is optimized by somebody, and it is not what we would prefer. And if we create as many switches to allow that review, is it oversight? Yes. Is it allowance only with oversight?
We can work that in.
And who uses the shed?
Yeah.
Is that for maintenance for that,
Yeah.
you know, their landscaping equipment?
Well, you know,
It's
so
not
where,
storage,
do you remember a while back we talked about, there was I think it was another property, commercial property, and they were, there's a question is whether having boats or kayaks on that property on top of non-parking area, if that was a display. Now, this situation, let's say that this is a multifamily, and every one of the 6 units on the small lot has a boat, and they all park it on the lawn.
Right, we need to make, like, I was thinking about this for the other place, like,
Yeah.
Right.
everybody has stuff. I mean,
I
I've
know.
got people in my neighborhood who have so much stuff.
And if the stuff has,
I
if the stuff has wheels underneath it,
Yeah.
it's still visually impacting,
Yeah.
and that's where it starts to get different.
How do you regulate that? Like, how much stuff can be out and about, sitting on the lawn and, you know, have boats and people would just have like, and like contractors come in with like
Well, and
stuff that they need to store, you know, in their yard for a little bit. I mean, it's an issue, like,
well, where I'm
Places.
concerned about it is where it's
Hopefully the homeowners
where
association.
where
will
it
take care of
creates some kind of affects the view shed.
yeah. So do these, are we requiring them to have a homeowners association?
Yeah, we're getting there.
Okay,
Yeah.
we're getting there, okay. I
Yes.
forgot about that part, okay.
So that's part of the really tedious and taxing work that Joe, the deputy planning director, and the town attorneys have gone through. So this next item.
It's the next sentence.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, you're good. But it states that multifamily development shall have a mandatory homeowners association with one of its duties expressed in a recorded declaration being to ensure compliance with section 7.5. This includes annual certification of deed restriction and workforce housing requirements. So those requirements are going to be in the deed.
Okay.
And Joe's been working on a draft deed just for the attorneys to start looking at it, to make sure our deed restriction language is acceptable. But feel like that's pretty good tight language right there.
Mm-hmm.
Does that homeowners association also apply to a small multifamily?
It would have to, since that's the mechanism that we would use for ensuring compliance with the deed restrictions.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, I see, right. That's a good question.
And then next is where we've already discussed it, but listing large multifamily development as a high impact use. And that was attached in your packet so you could see what that language actually was. And last meeting, we talked about both small and large being special use permit. So both small and large have an SR in the table of activities and uses. And we have striked through townhouse because we've now said that's multifamily development, or just clarified that it's multifamily development. And then everything else in here was just information, attachments for you to have as you were reviewing the document. So happy to answer any questions that you have. Not too far. Not knowing where discussion may land on this with the planning board, one thought that I had is that we obviously want to get this back to the attorneys to review. If this is the final document that we have, we would make the revisions that we've talked about today, get it to the attorney for their review. I don't know if you're comfortable with this or not. We could bring the revised document back to you in January, but also go ahead and have the Board of Commissioners place it on consent agenda in January so that they could have it in February. If not, we can, that's your call, that's your comfort level.
I'm personally comfortable with that.
I am
Does
too.
anybody else have?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
There's one question I still have about, in multifamily, we're talking about numbers of units. So if someone has a triplex, for example, and it's out, do we have triplexes in Nags Head? Do we have any? And if we do, I mean, are they characterized as multifamily? I guess that's my question.
That's a tough question. So we do have triplexes in Nags Head. They were not permitted as multifamily, and to my knowledge, they don't meet the multifamily requirements that were even in place prior to the removal. We have things, and there's a couple cottage courts down south where they've just, units have grown. And I don't think those were brought through the multifamily use process, unfortunately. So They're non-conforming.
Well, relative to nonconformities, I mean, it's my understanding, looking at the nonconforming section of our zoning ordinance, the UDO, it looks to me like you can build back anything and everything, just the way it was, as long as you don't increase the degree of nonconformity.
That is how the language reads.
So if something were to burn down or wash away or whatever, you can build back, if you're on the property line, no setback, you can build it back again, correct?
You can build it back with the same zoning nonconformity that you had when you lost it.
Right.
That language only speaks to zoning requirements though, so FEMA, flood, CAMA, all of those things might
Prevent.
change the,
outcome.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
So how are we feeling about letting staff get this to the attorney? Does everybody agree that that's okay? Put it on the BOC consent agenda
Yes.
so they can,
Yeah.
really? We're through it?
Yes.
You
I mean,
really
I can
want-
bring it back. We can
No.
delay it.
No, I'm
I'm-
good. I'm fine.
I
I've
feel
got,
I
you
feel
know,
like we've
it's
cut
an
a
old
lot of wood.
friend.
I feel like we've cut a lot of wood here. At this point, I feel like it's ready to start to live its own life.
Right.
Yes.
Let's launch the little bird.
Right, and just like Molly just said, it may come back, and it may.
Yeah.
Right.
Um,
Correct.
No.
The question is what carve-outs exist that that we'll get into in the future, and I see one right now, but I'm not going to talk about it.
Let us wonder. Okay, well,
Yeah.
all right.
Fly, let it fly.
Do we want a motion?
Yeah.
Yes, we need a motion then.
Motion to approve this document? Is that what we're doing?
With
the
revisions.
With
changes-
revisions from
With
today.
the revisions that we talked about
And then,
today.
yeah.
Right.
So that's a motion from Molly
Can I second it?
and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Wow. We're gonna miss that one. Sort of miss it, right? And now.
Did I hear a thud?
Yeah.
It just, I felt like a big chunk of paper just hit the desk.
We're moving on to discussion and consideration of text amendments related to drive-through restaurants. And Mr. Costello is here to help us with that.
Yeah, good morning. I'm just gonna wait till Kelly gets it pulled up.
And,
With her
Still
left
making her do it over there, huh, with her bad hand.
You get,
okay, one more.
yeah, I'd zoom in a little more, but I have what I wanna say too, cause gotta get classes. Anyway, you guys have heard this a couple times now. It's back to you. Thalitz Nags Head submitted a text amendment application to include the use restaurant drive-through as permissible in the commercial mixed-use development area and to amend the supplemental regulations associated with drive-throughs. Currently, drive-through restaurants are only allowed through special use process and with the supplemental regulations in the C2 General Commercial District. Some of the proposed amendments would be to require the site with the drive-through to have a 20-acre minimum lot size, to have direct signalized access off of US 158, and that the minimum size of the drive-through establishment would be 3,000 square feet. Or, I'm sorry, the maximum size allowable would be the 3,000 square feet. The planning board heard this at their October meeting, voted unanimously to recommend denial of the text amendment. In December, the December 3rd Board of Commissioners meeting, they heard the application, considered it, and basically recommended tabling and sending it back to you all to consider basically rectifying this conflict between the UDO and the comprehensive plan. The UDO currently allows for drive-through restaurants, as we already said, in the C2 district. The comp plan, though, in every specific character area, which each development application would look to the comprehensive plan if it's a special use, and it's specifically excluded as a use. So to resolve that conflict, it's back before you today. And so the two sort of apparent choices that the planning board has is either to amend the UDO to remove restaurant drive-through as an allowable use, or to amend the comprehensive plan to basically allow it as a acceptable use within one or more of the character areas. It should be noted that the comp plan is an official policy document adopted to strategically plan for and enhance the quality of life and physical character of the community. It was created utilizing, excuse me, an advisory committee which was appointed by the Board of Commissioners. They met over 15 times and in coordination with robust public outreach and community outreach. And in reviewing the notes and minutes, the advisory committee, there were two instances found where drive-through restaurants were discussed. The first states, pretty frankly, don't want more fast food or drive-through type restaurants. The other is an official minutes at the end of your packet, which says that along the US 158-64 corridor, uses should reflect only sit-down or walk-up restaurant. And so, in further looking at the policy considerations, the 2017 comp plan sets forth various character areas throughout the town. These are districts that have their own unique characteristics, and the allowable uses and appropriate scales of these uses are comprehensively described for each of the unique districts to ensure future development and redevelopment preserves the quality and uniqueness of each of those districts. The list of generally appropriate land uses specifically spells out drive-through restaurants are not desirable in any of the character areas. So we did an analysis to look at potentially if the planning board were to consider removing it from the zoning ordinance versus if they were going to allow it in one or more character areas. In looking at town-wide, there are 3 drive-through establishments that currently exist: the Dunkin' Donuts, the KFC Taco Bell, and the Sonic. If the planning board were to adopt an ordinance or to basically take it out of being allowable in the C2 general district, even by special use, it would really only make the Sonic a non-conforming use, as the KFC Taco Bell is non-conforming because it has frontage on US 12. And then the Dunkin' Donuts is part of an existing mixed-use development. So it would have the effect of only one increased nonconformity. Whereas if the whalebone character area was adjusted to allow drive-throughs as a acceptable use within that character area, there are about 250 unique parcels that are zoned C2 within the whalebone area. So it would still go through a special use permit process, but there would now be sort of that justification within the comprehensive plan to support a development application. And in the corridors character area, it would be even more. And so staff's recommendation is to continue to deny or recommend denial of this text amendment as proposed. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you all have them.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody have questions for Joe? Easy.
Yeah.
I can't think of any questions. Thank you, though.
Thank you.
Great.
Good job.
It was a great analysis, yes, thank you. Thorough.
Yeah.
The applicant is here. Would you like to address us?
If I might.
Please. Step up.
As everyone probably, or you may or may not remember, I'm Kraus Gray, and last time I was here, y'all slammed me pretty hard, 7-0. And I understand the reasoning somewhat. But I want to address this very briefly, and I don't want to belabor this. The one spot that you really ought to be allowing this type of product is my client's property. Putting aside the design issues, traffic, police, fire, those are design issues. Just, is it an appropriate thing when you have a shopping area shopping center. Basically, that's what this property is. You will note these drive-throughs are in fact normally designed for shopping centers. Pretty much all shopping centers have them in some type of out parcel. And there's a couple of reasons for that. One, from your perspective, one of the things that you want is to try and cut down on the amount of hard surfacing in the town. The more parking areas you have, the more hard surfacing you have, the more problems you have with stormwater runoff, etc. Here, there's already existing parking. Yes, we're adding a building to it and a drive-through. But part of the special use permit that we will be asking for, if the text amendment is allowed, is to go forward with an ability to put this in a location where parking already exists. In the original application, we showed where that parking had never been exceeded. We had affidavits from, or letters from, a number of the managers so indicating. Secondly, and probably more importantly, this particular site has its own septical system, and the Dare County Health Department has indicated it's adequate to cover this new facility. Anywhere else they go, what are they going to do? They've got to put a new septic system in, which means more effluent being pumped into the ground. And so, for the town's purposes, to reduce down the amount of effluent going into the ground is a good thing. So I simply recommend to you that the site we're talking about, and if you remember, the language that was proposed for the text amendment for this particular property was clear that yes, there may be 250 potential sites, but none of them can meet the other standards other than this particular piece of property. And I understand that, oh, you've already designed it so only one can meet. It's always that balancing act every town has to go through. You know, do we want to draft ordinances that only grant something to a particular, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. I get that. But at the same point in time, you do want some restrictions so you don't open something up to the entire town, all of your C2. I get that as well. The problem you've got right now is you do have an inherent conflict between where you allow it and where you don't allow it. Because C2 generally says you can do it, and then I call them overlay districts. Your overlay districts say you can't do it even though it's C2. I simply recommend to you that you do allow the drive-through. It can in fact be an appropriate use within the town. You've already said that. And when you allow the drive-through, you put the restrictions so that it's not open-ended to every other place, because you get the benefits that I've already articulated to you. I've already had this conversation. I already know what you probably are going to be thinking about it, but nonetheless, I really wanted to reiterate it because I'm back before you with this concept of, hey, this actually is good for the town. This isn't bad for the town because of the reasons that I stated. Thank you for listening to me again.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We appreciate your comments. Anybody want to make a motion, or do you want to discuss?
Well, I have to discuss a little bit, and that is, just right, Dave? I do, I have to, my only thing is that I believe that the comprehensive plan, as well as it is drafted, I think it's an excellent plan. It speaks to broad brush. It talks about, things that are, kind of nebulous. I mean, they're a little bit, they're not nebulous. Well, they're in the gray area. They're not, I mean, it's things, it's an aspirational document is what it is. I mean, to me, that's what we aspire to, the comprehensive plan. The zoning ordinance, on the other hand, is a legal document, and that carries a lot more weight. And I go back to what Molly said earlier on, and that was when this whole thing was when we were going through the comprehensive plan thing, this was something that was, our zoning ordinance was derived from the comprehensive plan, but I think somehow the zoning ordinance carries a lot more weight. And I think that we need to recognize that, given the amount of time that's been put into crafting the UDO. I think it's something that we support. So, with all that,
What do you think that I said?
no, I thought you said, Molly, that hey, I mean, my recollection was that you were very, very supportive of the UDO and the comprehensive plan, simply because there was a lot of involvement. There's a lot of people who were involved in that, in the crafting of this.
The whole town had the
Well, the whole town. I mean, they had number of public hearings on it, and you did not want to go back and redo what other people have basically agreed to. And that's when we were amending the zoning order, or the UDO. I mean, that was my understanding of it. Am I wrong, Molly? Am I mistaken?
I'm not 100% sure what you're saying, but.
Well, one of the things that okay, so we're taking what I agree is an aspirational document, and now we're starting to see where that infill is starting to deal with, and we're dealing with density, and you could say build out, or this version of build out. If we start to add in, we're increasing density, and that's the surveys that we've seen, probably also in conversations that we've all had with ex parte conversations we had with people not on this board, density is the word. That is 2023's word of the year in the planning business for me. And grandfathered, non-conforming, etc., are at odds with those aspirational documents, but are understandable when we start to look at when that initial situation became. Now, it might be clearly in the frame of the applicant's point of view, this is why, this is a reason they should be able to do it. But it's up to me to decide what my point of view of it is. And I see that this is a furthering in a direction that I'm not interested in. And I think that it starts to throw things, it could create a degree of acceleration. As well, existing, if you start to look at the safety issues associated with this, that were not explained away and have not been explained away. This is a busy thoroughfare. There's a lot of issues. You have a moving parking lot with people doing commerce, and then that commerce carries on to the road. A large fraction of automobile accidents take place directly after people go through drive-thrus. Do we need to increase that any further? This is in addition to restaurant with drive-thru, and that's it gives me agita.
I would like to add one thing to what you and Gary have said, and that is 2 years have been spent really looking at the plan for Nags Head, what we want to look like, how we want to feel, and the impact to the people that live here year-round. And I think this does not comply with the vision and the look of Nags Head. And all of the things that you've said certainly make sense. But the one thing that I can't resolve is the fact that this does not fit the comprehensive land use plan that was developed by a lot of input from a lot of very dedicated people. And so I think that this is something that we should not allow, and that we should correct the conflict
I agree.
by basically saying no.
Let's eliminate them. Yeah.
And this is not related to this item, but it brings up something that Gary and Kelly were talking about. If you have a nonconformity and there is a fire, you get to build back to that nonconformity. I'm not sure that it's something we might want to address. And not in this frame, but are we furthering a nonconformity and making it standard in every different stipulation? So I'm not sure that isn't something that I'd be interested in revisiting generally.
Yes, because if we say we don't want drive-throughs, but this non-conforming drive-through can rebuild, then,
Right.
Yeah,
you know.
yeah.
it's kind of-
I'm reminded of how often we hear, and some of us discuss, the concept of, how often do you hear when you cross into Nags Head, when you cross the town line, it's totally different. And, that's something we all talk about and hear, but what exactly, defines that? Sure, there's all kinds of things, buffering and architectural, but there's a lot of things that go into it, and I would argue that one of them is an absence of drive-through restaurants. I mean, it's, all up and down the corridor, the character areas are there for a reason, and if we eliminated from the corridor district, that's where you're driving through town. That's where we all have that sense that, we're in Nags Head now, so.
And the potential to affect 250 properties is
Yeah.
kind of shocking.
I too understand some of the possible benefits of, but it's sort of like if you have to do one, this is, but I'm opposed. I think we should rectify the conflict by eliminating them.
Yes, and we're not eliminating coffee shops.
No.
We're not. We're just simply saying we don't like drive-throughs.
Right.
That's it. So, I
Right.
mean, I think the applicant can work around that, in my opinion.
Right.
And I've got a very limited opinion on it. I
Right.
mean, limited in terms of knowledge. So, I mean, and the applicant surely has a lot more knowledge about what works and what doesn't work. So if it doesn't work here, perhaps
Right.
they need to move on.
Well, and I just
Right.
keep coming back to what the fire department said and the safety issues. I mean, they absolutely said it's not gonna work.
That's right.
Well, I know I'm not supposed to speak, but as to the design issues, not the legislative issues, it's been totally resigned, different location, whether it will still meet the requirements of the town as far as the police and fire, I cannot answer, ma'am. I don't do design work, that's not me. But we did take into account all of the good comments from those from you and everyone else about the concerns about the design itself. But that's not what this is about today.
Right.
This is about this inherent conflict that you have between your two documents. And the commissioners deferred this proposal that we have submitted legislatively to you, make a decision on how you want to deal with the conflict.
And to Gary's point, this business, this entity, has, to my count off the top of my head, 4 other units on the beach. One is drive-through, 3 are not. So it can operate
Yeah.
not as a drive-through.
So,
And I just informally polled neighbors and friends in Nags Head, just with our 2 options here, and every single person that I got my informal polling from was definitely on the side of, we like Nags Head like it is, don't allow drive-throughs on all these properties.
so I'm thinking I hear consensus here.
Yeah.
Unless anybody, I think we,
Can I make a motion to recommend the denial?
of course you can.
I would like to do that.
I'll second the motion.
Okay. So we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Moving on then, thank you, Mr. Gray. Moving on then, Kelly, please to BOC actions from their December 6th meeting.
Okay. I just wanted to note that Michelle Gray retired. Friday was her last
Oh,
day.
she's really gone, huh?
She's gone.
That's gonna be strange.
It's gonna be a different feel up there, so if you see her out and about, just congratulate her. We're gonna miss her. I had highlighted here just the reorganization of the board, following the November election. As you know, Megan Lambert, became a member of the Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Brinkley was, reelected as well, so. We had the public hearing for the Makita subdivision waiver, and the board, motioned to grant that subdivision waiver with the two conditions that we had, about we'll need additional grade information prior to issuing any type of permit, and that if there is any future residential development there, there can be no direct discharge of stormwater into the 404 wetlands. So, public hearing to the UDO for drive-through, we just went through that process. Public hearing as it pertains to the appraisal and purchase of precious metals and antiques and collectibles, as an accessory use to jewelry shops. The board did briefly talk about the concerns we had with firearm sales and the 90 days perhaps being too long. And the Board of Commissioners agreed that the 90 days likely is too long, so they reduced that to 14 and went ahead and adopted that as it was presented with the 14-day reduction. We did, Commissioner Sanders, who's on the Estuarine Shoreline Management Plan, provided the update that we were unfortunately declined for the grant that we had applied for. But I know that Town Manager Garman and her Deputy Town Manager and Finance Director, Amy, they're working on next steps with that and possible funding options. So, and then next up is the appointment of David Thompson to the Planning Board, so we're happy he's here.
They're not perfect.
Yeah.
You've been a great addition today, so appreciate everything that you've done.
Thank
It was
you.
Quite a doozy of a meeting to come in.
I know. Jump right in the deep end.
I felt like we dealt with really complicated issues pretty quickly, and I think it says a great deal about, you know, how well we've had the ball teed up for us
I agree.
Yeah, for sure.
And thank you both very much.
on this New Year's Appreciation Day.
We could only do it because of the great advice and guidance you give us.
Yes. All right, enough of all this.
Enough sugar.
It is the holiday season after all.
So I highlighted this just so that you know that it's occurring with the new EMS station being constructed across the street beside the fire station, and then long-term goal of a new fire station. Town manager presented that perhaps we should just have the consultants look at this as like a campus-wide plan for all the municipal facilities here. Obviously, this is an old room. We've packed it out in here numerous times, so maybe we look at it more holistically and this is more of a campus, and what should we be doing with all of these buildings down the road. And then also, Town Manager Garman gave an update on the new rules that will be going into effect for Dare County Environmental Health. Those will take effect January 1. I think we've talked about that a little bit here, but what's behind it is that for both residential and commercial properties, but specifically for residential, if you have an on-site conventional system, but during the time when you were permitting, you specified a pre-treatment option, like some type of advanced system for your repair area. So currently, if your conventional system fails, the Dare County Health Department can use their best professional judgment, go out there, look at the failure itself, remove the soil, bring in new soil, and you can put a conventional system back where it was. That's typically what happens. But now with these new rules, if that conventional on-site system fails, it's got to go. You're not going to put anything back there, and you're going to go to your pre-treatment option that you identified upon permitting. So it's going to be a great expense for property owners to go to that. Any type of advanced system is going to have annual maintenance associated with it. Most of these repair areas are in the rear yard where there's trees and vegetation, and if they were forced to go back there and install that pre-treatment option, it would trigger a lot of land disturbance as well. So it's my understanding that Dare County and several other localities, including Nags Head, is hopeful of getting this back to the legislators and having what they're calling best professional judgment added back into the rule, so that if Josh Coltrane and his environmental specialists get to use their best professional judgment and they deem that it is appropriate to put a conventional back where it was with modified soils, then that's what you can do, as opposed to having to go to pretreatment.
Makes sense.
That would not occur until April, May. So between January 1, April, and May, if you have a failure of your on-site conventional system, just start babying your system so that doesn't happen.
Kelly, what exactly is pretreatment? I'm sorry, I just don't get it. I don't understand exactly what pretreatment is. I mean,
So it's going to be like your peat system, your easy flow, your
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah,
So
Shoot it in outer
if,
space.
easy
if
treat rather.
for me to understand this, if my system, a system fails, Dare County comes in and says, you've got a level, you can no longer use that existing area, and cut down all the trees, and the Lorax is unhappy.
Right, they're going to look at your original septic permit, and you will have identified your active septic and then your repair septic, and whatever you identified as your repair is what you're now required to do.
And that is regardless of what has taken place in geological time in that area. Is that correct?
Short of there being something that has happened that would no longer make that area functional, like if you have built something on it and now those soils are now compact and
Right.
affected.
What I'm, is somebody plants a sequoia, and it grows into Jack and the Beanstalk territory, and it's huge. That's got to come down.
It would,
Okay.
in this scenario. So
This is, again, one of the things that really freaks me out a little bit. Dare County gets to do whatever they want in municipal area with no regard to how it bumps into code.
So this is actually statewide.
I get that. But, they're the ones that are doing it, so
So we blame that?
blah, blah, blah,
So I will say Josh Coltrane has been the leader in trying to get environmental professionalism written back into the language.
Sure. But I look at so many of the things that we've done recently, and this undoes them by taking a level of control or review here and just tosses it out of the frame. And bless their hearts for it. I think I said there.
While we're on this subject, it occurs to me, and I think maybe we've talked about it, I keep forgetting, that we no longer have, the planning board no longer has somebody on septic health,
Ooh,
right?
dun dun dun.
That's accurate, so perhaps next meeting we need to, I mean, unless you're prepared to do it this meeting.
Who wants to volunteer, or we can do it next meeting? Either volunteer or be voluntold.
Voluntold.
Anyway, we don't have to do it today, but I think we should,
Is there a
we do
is there
want
any-
somebody.
Is there anything going on with septic health between now and the next meeting?
No, the biggest thing happening right now is we did receive our 15 groundwater level loggers and our 2 water quality loggers. And Connor Twitty has been out the past couple days getting those installed. We're calibrating them now, so it's pretty exciting. That will be the primary update, is that our loggers are in and they're becoming operational.
So there's
There's
no
one in my
advantage.
neighborhood.
So there's no advantage to
Yeah, I don't
getting
think
it
we
done
need-
right now.
Yeah, we don't have to rush through
And
it,
they,
but
they meet quarterly, so the
Yeah.
next meeting will probably not be until
They're not- they're-
yeah, so
March.
let's, but be thinking about it, folks, if anybody would like to serve
Well,
on
you know,
that.
is there anybody in this group that is interested in doing it?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Actually, I did a thesis on water quality planning and management
Okay,
for
yeah.
Tennessee.
All right.
Ding,
And
ding,
this-
ding,
this-
ding, you're in.
yeah, but this was a different scene. This was, this looked at potentially runoff. Runoff was the issue then, because non-point source runoff was considered to be more of a pollutant than point source discharges, which were, pipes going into rivers and stuff like that. Well, in Tennessee, there was a lot of confusion going on simply because the federal government came in, they built all these dams and stuff like that, and they took control over water quality in the state. North Carolina is not like that. So, and we've got the saltwater issues. So I'm interested in learning, and me could tell you, I'm paying $100 a month for wastewater treatment. And I'm of the opinion that we need to start using more of a stick than a carrot to get folks to comply with our rules. I mean, that kind of money, I would say comply with our rules. It's Dare County.
I'm sold, he should go on.
He's the one.
I'm kind of.
Passionate.
Can I make a motion to nominate Gary?
Nominating Gary for the committee.
Was that your audition?
No,
I-
that was,
I-
you
he-
just said you're interested.
He just ran for the president
No,
of the Septic
no.
Health Initiative office. No, I'm more than willing
I
to
hear a
say.
motion?
I made a motion. It's been
Okay.
seconded, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all joking aside, we have a motion and a second, we can do it this way, right? And Gary, I think
Isn't
you're
he
Wait
have
till
to-
next month.
Isn't this
No.
where you bring your planning board sword out and unite him?
You might change your mind. Can we?
Here.
Okay, so anyway,
Done.
great, good, that's good, Gary volunteered.
I feel like a lot of times when we do things like that, it's a bit of a silence and we all kind of enter into or remain in our own realms. And I feel that's something that,
Right.
I'm really glad to hear that.
Right.
You
The
know.
level of enthusiasm
Yeah, sure.
is beyond compare.
That's
Absolutely,
right.
I mean,
absolutely,
really.
absolutely. Perfect.
Okay, there you go.
All right,
Give him a heads up,
And
Gary's
you're
coming
back.
on. Okay,
that's it, that's all I
that's it,
have.
okay, well, on that note, good, thank you, then. We ended up, thank you for your report, Kelly.
Can I throw something under my agenda? It looks that it came up here. Are we there yet?
Yeah, I guess we're there, aren't we? Or Kelly, your report
There's
is,
director's report, but I don't think there's much to go over. Let's see. So we've updated on the loggers, EV plan, we're still at the phase of trying to sort out grant requirements, the amount of money so the grant's gonna give us $10,000. As we're moving through the process of quote for installation to have it run to where we want it, et cetera, it's significant. So we're trying to take some time and get some numbers lowered before we come back with any final details on that. But
Is Epstein moving?
yes,
Okay,
yeah,
Cool.
that's on track.
excellent.
great.
So yeah, EV, I think
I'm sorry.
we're probably at 26,000. We're working on it.
Okay.
we'll continue to push forward with that. Sand relocation is really busy. Permitting staff have been amazing, keeping turnaround at 2 days.
That's pretty quick.
And everything going on with Art and Culture Committee and the holiday markets, everything's been
Yeah.
great.
They've been great.
Wonderful feedback.
Yeah, weather's been very cooperative.
How was the candy cane?
It was really good.
Was it?
Yeah, having the littles at dusk and not at dark apparently worked out a lot better.
Yeah,
Yeah.
You think?
yeah.
Joe's littles.
Oh,
were
they
there.
even let Joe's kids go? Okay.
We did.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that kind of puts you in the hot.
We try to make the kids tough here in the Outer Banks whenever we can.
Hey Kelly, I have a question about,
Yeah.
there's one thing at the top where you said there was a meeting on November 28th with Donna Creef with Association of Realtors and
Yes.
over occupancy. What was that all about?
So, I guess it was when I was reporting out at a Board of Commissioners meeting about the Septic Health Committee had discussed over occupancy, the parking problems that was leading to, and us creating ordinances to rope off your septic areas. That combined with over occupancy being listed as a concern on the community survey. I think Donna just wanted to have a chance to sit down with staff, kind of see what her thoughts were. It was a good conversation. She said that she would be the liaison and coordinate with having Connor Twitty, our environmental health, or environmental planner, go do a presentation for OVAR about our concerns with over occupancy and parking, as well as what our septic health initiative provides, and that maybe they can be more proactive in getting that
That's
out
good.
into the community.
That's nice.
So,
Okay.
yeah.
good.
And then the next one, the climate adaptation for on-site wastewater presentation. What was that about?
Oh, that was something also that Connor had been invited to do with Jane Harrison. It was just basically giving an update to a group of interested environmental-minded people and some academic people as well about our program and what we do, and potentially how other areas can incorporate that into their day-to-day. So what came of that was, I think Connor's actually been contacted by at least 2 people, just wanting to know the process for our program and how we got it going and what it entailed in terms of budgeting. So
That's interesting.
yeah, the program's getting a lot of good feedback, and I think Roberta's going to try to highlight the program on the next Destination Dare.
Okay.
Cool.
Nice.
That's kind of almost exactly what I was thinking. That's a really, really good outreach for it. Yeah. And it's always neat when you have a Destination Dare, that kind of back and forth, what comes from it. And it'll be on all sides, but it recognition is a really good thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And part of our strategic planning is that we do need to have more education all the way around, but certainly with the program, because I don't remember what the number was, but the community survey, it was a surprisingly high number of people who did not know about the program.
It kind of brings on something that I'm repeatedly told, which is, we are a town of no. And, but at the same time, I don't think that it's accurate. I think that there is, if the point of view of the people is, if I have a choice between, permission and forgiveness, I'll take the latter, if possible. I feel like that's not my experience. That, you do get more permission with information, and that way it's much, it pushes everything into a compliant, conforming kind of issue.
Okay.
That's all I have.
That's it for Kelly's report. And so now we are on to members' agenda. Did you say you have something?
Yeah, I just was thinking, with your conversation with Kelly earlier about nonconformity and.
Yeah, I think
and-
we need to re-examine that.
And one of the frames, or a couple of the frames that I'm thinking about are, commercial versus residential.
Yes.
And it comes down to why. Why is this nonconformity? Why did it exist? How do you see it going with the rebuilt, reformed structure? And why can't you, normally nonconformities are done so that you can accommodate a growth or a new use. And if you're starting to draw the lines again, why can't you shove it into the plan that you're remaking? Why can't you cram it into the existing footprint? Now, I understand from a commercial side, maybe they have got a point of view. From a residential side, maybe there's a different point of view on that as well. But I feel like if our point of view to the applicant with Starbucks is that we've got disparity between our documents, we're creating room for litigation from his point of view. That's what I saw an agenda there perhaps. And if you're not going to create clarity, I'll let the courts do it. So why don't we create clarity in saying if we do have a nonconformity, or let's look at if we have nonconformity, let's understand why it's there, and if we're allowing it to carry on after it is rebuilt, etc.
Kelly, it used to be, we used to have language in our zoning, in our non-conforming section of our zoning ordinance that speaks to something such as, if the setbacks can be met, they shall be met. Something such as that. In other words, it's not always a given that if you build into a setback or you build on the property line or whatever, that you're going to be able to do that again. It said something to the effect that if the setback, as an example, setbacks, not height or something, or coverage, but if the setback can be met, it shall be met. And I'm wondering, is that language still in our non-conforming section of our zoning ordinance?
It is. So I think in the context of what we're talking about, if there's a home where obviously the home was likely built before zoning was in effect.
Right.
So the setback, maybe it is on the property line or 1 foot in. If that home were to be completely destroyed and the language that would outline how that home gets to come back, that language about complying to the greatest extent possible is still in there.
Okay.
But if that home sustains fire damage on the south side and it needs to be rebuilt or repaired, there is not language that would say, oh, I'm sorry, you lost a portion of your home, it's in the setback and it can't go back. That's why that language is in there, to say that if you have a non-conforming situation, you can repair and replace in the same location so long as the degree of non-conformity is not increased. So
well, that's the troublesome. That's troublesome because what we see is what we get. I mean, what you see out there today is what you're going to get, and it's going to be bigger. It's going to be larger. It's going to, when it comes to things like lot coverage, which is a huge issue for many of us, I think. Lot coverage is something that stays constant. I mean, if you're over lot coverage for whatever reason, you're way over lot coverage. You can stay over lot coverage. That's not you can't change that. That's not something that you need to deal with. Is that correct, or am I mistaken? If I'm mistaken, tell me.
No, but I think there's context to it. So oceanfront property,
Right.
that lot coverage was dictated by the first line of stable natural vegetation. So it was a 35,000 square foot lot based on where that first line of stable vegetation was in 1980. Well, after storm after storm after storm, that first line has receded. And so now what was 30% lot coverage in the 80s, because of the receding of that first line of stable natural vegetation, they're at 40% lot coverage through no wrongdoing of their own.
Now, when that comes to pass in that very frame, is when the applicant comes to rebuild exactly what they had on the same footprint with the same lot coverage, which is an overage, is that narrative in the document, in the deed, in whatever agreement that's there?
I don't know that we've had a scenario where we've had a non-conforming home rebuilt, a non-conforming oceanfront home that has lost lot area, rebuilt in the same footprint. They're normally moving west.
Okay.
And as they move west,
For their own purposes.
we
So
try to bring them into compliance
Got
and
it.
work with them as much as possible.
got it. So now let's say in a commercial frame, we've got a commercial business that has a catastrophic loss of one frame, whatever type, and they are going to come back and they want to do exactly what they had, and they had a nonconformity. They're covered. They should be allowed to do that per code right now. Is that what I?
They are. In fact, that's the language that was adopted as part of the C5 amendment.
Yeah.
We created that language for the C5, and then everybody was in agreement that that language was appropriate town-wide, not
Yeah.
just for
There was
C5.
so much public
Now-
pushback on that.
That's different than what you were talking about.
It is.
Yeah.
In that same scenario, before they build back, if they could comply
They
and
will.
be appropriate in the zoning, if they could do that before they built back, shouldn't they do that as opposed to?
Absolutely, and the
non-conforming.
language is in there.
Yeah.
If you want to give me a
Yeah.
second, I'll try to pull it
No,
out.
no,
No, we
but it's
believe you.
but it's one of those things where I feel like every one of these conditions becomes an exception, but that becomes a precedent in and of itself, which becomes a brick in the wall moving in the direction of a change. Yet, is there documentation and agreement that this is a nonconformity and it's going on? Why? How? For how long? And everything was done up to the standards for exception, and that would really help. I think for me to explain to a new applicant that wants to start to tilt the earth in a direction that I'm not happy with, to explain to them, these are two different things. They're non-comparable. To talk about these non-conformities as comparable is an academic discussion, not an actual discussion.
Well, in between site nonconformities, setback nonconformities, parking nonconformities, structural nonconformities, and use nonconformities, I mean, there is no one solution.
Yeah, no,
to all
and
of
I
it.
get, just to establish that there is documentation on it.
Yes.
And then the last thing is, I really want to go revisit parking in commercial. I feel like, to get back to the Tanger Outlet Mall as an example, one parking place per business for staff, for employees is under.
Yeah, the conversation started with restaurants, and then we kind of got off track. So there's several items like that
Yeah.
that will have to come back up.
Yeah, and looking at with recent, that and groundwater, rainwater, we have some existing stuff that we're really, we're regularly bumping up against. And yeah.
Well, I will say that we've had a couple pools being installed, and our new requirement for a dewatering plan for pool installation has been going really well.
And
So-
yeah,
That's great.
yeah, and
Yeah.
been well received by the people doing it, because what it means is that they're not getting a stop work
Right.
because they've already got something going. They already are allowing it, so it's actually helping. They like that.
There's clear communication on the expectation.
That's great. Good success. Okay, anybody else? Members' agenda?
Kelly, I was wondering, would it be possible to get us a copy of the site plan for the Epstein Beach access? I think it's getting done, but it looks like they're changing the entire, they're changing the entire structure. And I just was curious about trying to get a handle on what it looks like, what it's gonna be, you know? I mean, I know it's gonna meet all the requirements of the town, but it would be good to see the site plan. I don't think the planning board's ever seen the site plan for that, have we?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the site plan
Way
came
back when.
We did see
through,
Oh, we did? I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I don't remember.
It was, because it went up and they couldn't meet the budget constrictions.
Right.
With the new
Yeah.
budget constrictions, did that affect the site plan much?
the only changes, I can pull up David Ryan's email, there was a deviation in the parking on the south side to accommodate some wastewater changes.
Okay.
There was no reduction in parking. I think it was just trading out some concrete for some turf stone. And then architecturally, there was a I guess a financial breakdown between asphalt shingles versus wooden shingles. So that was the change. But I'm happy to send all that back out to you because we do have it.
Okay, if it's, yeah.
Yeah.
Gary wants to see it at least.
I'm sorry, I don't recall seeing it, that's all. And it was just me, but I'm sorry, I just don't
No
remember
apology
seeing that
necessary.
site plan. I don't,
No, that's
No
fine. I'm
wonder it
happy
looks
to send it
different
back
to
out.
Okay, anybody else, members' agenda?
I would just like to take a minute to thank the Board of Commissioners. I am humbled and honored to be a part of this group. I thank them for their support. I've lived in Nags Head full-time now for 12 years, but I've been coming since 1974. And my entire adult life spent at least 100 days a year in Nags Head. There's nowhere else in the world I would rather live than Nags Head. I love the town of Nags Head. I think it's the best run town that I know of anywhere. And if I can be a small part of continuing that legacy, I want to do what I can. But thank you all very much, and I'm pleased to be here.
Thank you. We're glad to have you, David.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I just wanted to bring up one thing. Was it January 3rd meeting is going to be recognition of Renee Cahoon and her. So it would be great if everybody joined
And
that.
drive-throughs on the
Yeah.
public, on the public hearing
Yeah, let's
too.
be here.
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, anybody else?
Can I make a motion to
I
adjourn?
just, don't I get a chance? I just, I don't have anything big. Everybody's already gone, but I did want to wish everybody happy holidays, Merry
Yeah.
Christmas, all the holidays you celebrate or don't. Enjoy your time off. Yes, and
safe
thank you. It's been a good year, I think, and I agree. I think we did well today, getting through some pretty thick
I'm
stuff.
looking at the little hand on the wall.
I know you want to talk some more?
No, it's like, this is great. Can I make
I
a
know.
motion to adjourn?
Okay, we have a motion to
Welcome
adjourn. That's
aboard.
all we need. We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Okay.
Old Mexico, up on the high side, not the.